til Bøje Larsens blog. Jeg håber, du vil glædes over den video, jeg præsenterer i dag.
This video is about Robert Falcon Scott. He was a British Royal Navy officer and Antarctic explorer, 1868 to 1912. He led 2 expeditions to the Antarctic, with the most famous being the Terra Nova expedition, 1910 to 1913. During the Terra Nova expedition, Scott and his team aimed to be the first to reach the South Pole. But they faced harsh conditions, extreme weather, and logistical challenges. A few years ago, research analyzed the layers of the Antarctic ice and showed that the weather around the pole, when Scott was there, was very bad. So, the bad weather was and is not something that Scott invented to hide his late arrival in the South Pole. When Scott finally reached the South Pole on January 17, 1912, they discovered that the Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen had beaten them to it by about a month. Scott and his team faced further difficulties returning from the South Pole, including harsh weather, illness, and lack of supplies. Scott and 4 other expedition members died on the 29th of March, easy for me to remember, as the 29th of March is also my birthday, during their return from the South Pole. Many books have been written about Scott's expedition and the reasons for its failure, including books about the other competitors for the South Pole. They include the mentioned Norwegian Roald Amundsen, 1872 to 1928, and Ernest Shackleton, 1874 to 1922, who attempted to reach the South Pole but failed on January 9, 1909. I have read these fascinating books. In this video, I will not, however, make a resume of the external events in Scott's travel, but I will focus on the inner story. By that, I mean how Scott mentally handled the trip and the relationship to his friends and employees in the group. I do not think it has been told before. Mainly, he has been portrayed as a failure, but I consider him an extraordinary leader of men and himself. My source is the book published after his death about the trips, mainly based on his letters, which were found in his death camp going back from the South Pole. The book was published in many languages. The one I show you and refer to is the Danish version. The original version in English has the title Scott's Last Expedition. In the book, Scott gives a detailed account of what I will call the external events, but also of the inner story of the expedition, which I, as mentioned before, will focus on here. As I only have the Danish version of Scott's book, I will translate the Danish text I refer to and sometimes give the page numbers in the Danish version. I often do not cite the text directly, but summarize it and comment. Scott generally admires his partners deeply, highlighting their positive qualities and unwavering spirit. Among his team members were Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, Lawrence Oates, and Edgar Evans, each contributing to the common task, and all of them without protest giving their life for the task. I believe that Scott's work as a leader contributed to that. Here, I summarize what we can learn from Scott. 1. Scott does not brag about himself. I have not shown myself to be a great explorer, he says, for instance, page 355. 2. Praise others and yourself for small progress. I, Bøje Larsen, think that an old Stoic philosopher has said that what is necessary is never despicable. It can mean, do not complain about the trouble life offers you. They are a part of life. Scott seems to follow that principle, page 225. 3. Scott used donkeys, dogs, and some form of cars to pull their sleds. Amundsen only used dogs, and posterity has praised him for it. But Scott was more experimental, and today, it is cars, or some form of tracked vehicles, that are used in Antarctica. At that point, he has won. 4. Don't let yourself be beaten by competitors, here, Amundsen. Competitors doesn't matter. What is important is what you achieve in relation to your goals, page 227. 5. After all, it's the work itself that counts. Page 227. Never mind what people think about it. You can't be an innovator by doing like everyone else. 6. The day Scott has made most of these comments in his diary, he and his companions die in the tent when a strong storm prevents them from getting to the next food depot. Oates, wounded and thus concerned he was a burden to the others, had limped out of the tent into a blizzard on March 17th and was never seen again. But his noble suicide would not save Scott, Wilson, and Bowers. Scott writes about Oates' action, "This is the behavior of a gentleman." 7. Other, less moral persons than Scott would have been saying all the bad things about his companions. Now, he would be free to criticize them and make them responsible for the group's failure. It could have been his payback time. He similarly praises competitor Amundsen for coming first. He does not write that Amundsen has somehow cheated. But Scott, also on his deathbed, is a gentleman. If Scott could maintain an equal mind when facing death at -30 degrees Celsius, having failed to be first at the pole, you and I can face our small problems in our daily life. Thank you for watching my video. And please subscribe.